dialectic, where basically what Hegel says is you have the object, the phenomenal world out there. You have masters who are people who are willing to put themselves at risk death, risk their own well-being or whatever, to assert themselves over the phenomenal world. And you have the people who are afraid to take that risk, who essentially exist at the whim of the people who are comfortable taking that risk. When I hear people say like about going with the flow or like letting things be, shit like that, then it's like, okay, well, you have a choice in this life to be the fly or the windshield. You make that choice, you become the fly, essentially. You can only react to the things that are happening around you.
I might be getting slightly off topic, and I'm not super well versed in the corpus, but I'm thinking of something in reference to Lady Babylon, because she is the servant of all, she is the mistress of all.
Yes.
In relation to what you're saying, it's just wondering your take on that, because on the one hand, we're told that you have to assert true will and dominance over all living things,
right.
But on the other hand, we're told of the power of service.
Yeah, but when you think of Babylon, you've got to realize she's in the sphere of Bina, above the abyss, in the supernal triad of the tree of life. So, like, we're talking about her existence happens at a place where all contradictions are resolved in themselves, and there isn't actually a conflict. And she's given to us as something to aspire to, specifically because she's unattainable in this sense, and beyond the abyss. It's like a guiding light, almost. So, like, that concept works if you exist above the abyss, but we don't. So, we exist in the phenomenal world.
What we're talking about as well is sort of exerting your dominion over the universe and that sort of thing doesn't necessarily negate the idea of service either, because service is fundamental to, like, the AA, for instance. It's
Absolutely.
like, you automatically will be in charge of a person lower than you, for instance.
And the whole underlying concept behind the AA is, like, we exist to bring humanity to the next step. So, like, there's an implicit service there. This actually has a lot to do with traditional monarchy, like or at least the ideological underpinnings, not necessarily the reality of traditional monarchy, but the ideology at least was that the king was, yes, absolute in rule and descended from the gods and controlled everything, but also in service to the state, in service to the people.
Yeah, be their protector and their advocate.
Absolutely. And we didn't really see that happen in reality too much, but that was the idea. That was supposed to be the idea, at least.
The voice and the servant of the people.
Yes.
Did Crowley ever look at Taoism? It's on the
yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Crowley actually did a transliteration of the Tao Te King and the I King, his own sort of versions of them, which he considered to be superior to the existing ones. And actually, there's only one version that I've seen that's really better than his, and it's just because it has the Chinese in the back, and you can actually look up all the different meanings for the ideograms and so on and so forth. So it's very complete.
Because the Taoism is all about going with the
I think it was much more passive, that system, right? The Tao system sort of emphasizes this very go with the flow attitude, right?
And that's a conflict within THelema. And I wouldn't say conflict necessarily, but it's almost like there's one point where he says, true will is ultimate freedom, but it's also the severest restriction. It's like, in a way, you're ultimately free to follow your own will, but you're also restricted to doing this one thing. And as much as Crowley's about, manifesting yourself and causing things to change, you're also, in a way, completely subservient to your guardian angel.
Could it be maybe another analogy to maybe, like this paradox, yes, go with the flow and yet assert your own will. Maybe it's about you can do what you want within the natural laws. It's like a canoe, like a person in a canoe on a river.
Well, the analogy really uses this to a chess game. It's like you can start off the game with a certain number of moves, but once the game progresses to a certain point, there's only ever one right move at any given time, and that's the best move you can make, and it is objectively the best move you can make. Yeah. That's why no human can ever beat a computer at chess, really. Like, if the computer is programmed to win at chess, it will win at chess, because there is only ever one right move, and you can make mistakes.
But it's like, you can't change the course of the river, but you can change how you sail on it. Would that be a good way to say this is what magic is?
Well, to an extent. How do I put this? The problem with the whole go with the flow concept is it seems to encourage non-action. I don't really think that's the point of Taoism. It gets interpreted that way. I don't see it that way. In a sense, they talk about how, by going with the course of events, you can influence events more directly. that's
that
relevant.
just basically asserts the fact that everything is counterbalanced by everything else. So
Yes.
it's not saying that you go with the flow in the sense of just go along with things. It's saying that you recognize that counterbalance, and there's also the matter of the goal that's involved, I think, as well.
Absolutely.
But they even call it non-action philosophy in like the university.
Yeah, but
courses.
that's an interpretation.
Yeah.
Wu Wei, right? Is that how it's pronounced? That's this view of non-action, right? But I think there might be something close to what you're saying implied, because there's another part where he says something. I would say it says something about the lower overcomes the higher, right? So even though it's submissive, it's still sort of effective in a way, in a non-active
Yeah, it's
way.
being justified in the sense that it is effective,
Yeah.
which is absolutely correct. I mean, when I say like you should be causing change and you should be the one that people are reacting to, it doesn't necessarily mean you go and like just wave your dick around all the time. Like it doesn't work that way, because that's not actually an effective method. Like just bullying and pushing yourself on everyone. There's this tendency, and it's a really bad tendency in the THelema community to associate this idea of like creating change and creating action with just kind of like getting in everybody's face. And the reality is that's not an effective method. Like there's a reason that people are polite. There's a reason we have laws in civilization. It's because like as much as I might want to be like the Nietzschean Superman to totally like make everyone do my bidding and follow my will and blah blah blah, if I just get in people's face and yell at them to do that, that's not going to be an effective method. Like they're not actually going to do that. You gotta have tact. You gotta have subtlety. I think that is in the book of the law.
And you gotta know the currents and know how to use them into your advantage.
Yeah, you gotta know what situation you're in and what's the most effective way of manifesting your will in
You
that
gotta
situation.
know the laws, and the more you understand the laws, the more you can use them to get what you want.
Non-action works the best when you have like too many choices and you can't make a decision. That's when I go like, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to.
Well, and that's the big conflict that we have in our culture right now, is we're overwhelmed with choices. And we're all told that we can do all these different things, and it's just makes it very difficult. Like, how do you know which direction to go in? And that's the first thing that has to kind of be overcome when it comes into actually like getting to know yourself and so on and whatnot. Even just like simple analysis of desires, even if if it is the wrong desire, it's like the question then becomes, you've got to explore it to the extent that there's actually there's a yoga ritual that Crowley recommends people do that I think is very valuable when it comes to this in his Bereshith book, which is literally just like you start with an idea, I want this or I want that, and then just keep tracing it back. Like, okay, why do I want this? Why do I have this need? Why do I have this desire? What created that? You go back and back and back and trace each idea as far as you can, even to the point where sometimes he was like, just even doing it as a regular exercise, you sit down and go to meditate on this and ask myself, why did I sit down to do this ritual? Well, I read it in this book. Why did I read this book? Where did this book come from? And then trace it back and trace it back and trace it back. And that's a very interesting way of, because when you start doing this regularly, you start to find that like you want things for really random reasons, like things that you wouldn't have even associated them with. Or it's like that, like I can trace something back to a certain extent. It's like, well, I have this desire to do this basically because I watched a movie when I was 14 and I thought it was cool, and like I thought it was cool then, and then somehow it got complicated into my actual life and so on. So that's just an example, but it usually comes down to something like that.
Maybe you haven't gone back far enough yet, or maybe you have an attraction to these things because they're somehow in your greatest good.
Yeah.
Or why was that thing cool? Why did you feel that thing in the movie was cool?
Exactly.
Why did you watch that movie in the first place?
And then why did you say, oh, that's cool? What is it about you that thinks that this thing is cool? And you go back and back.
Yeah, I used to want to be a marine biologist, and at one point when I was doing this exercise, I realized it was because I randomly saw the movie Splash in 1988 on TV on a Sunday. That was just like, it was just something I was flipping through the channels and it was on, and then I was like, yeah, mermaids are hot. So we go from there.
Interesting. Well, I used to have this